everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for Automate Accounts Receivable, Delight Customers, Collect Faster, and Boost Working Capital. My name's Devin Clark. I'll be moderating today's webinar. I'm Centime's Director of Demand Generation, and I'm joining you today from sunny Boston, Massachusetts. Please feel free to use the chat and share where you're joining from. Before we begin, I just want to go over a few housekeeping notes. First, we are recording, so if you're curious to go back and re-watch this webinar, we'll send you an on-demand recording via email in the next few days. And second, we just kindly ask that you engage with our polls. It gives our speakers an understanding of who you are and really just helps guide the conversation. If you are joining us from CPA Academy, you are required to answer at least 3 polls for CPE credit. There are a total of 4 polls today. And once we launch a Zoom poll, there will be a pop-up on your Zoom screen. And that's where you can select your answer, and you'll just want to make sure you submit that. If for any reason that you are having trouble seeing that pop up, there should be a Zoom icon at the bottom of your screen once I launch a poll. And you can click that and that should surface the window. And for any reason, if you're still having trouble, you can just feel free to reach out on chat or on Q&A and just let me know, and I'll reach out to you after the session to make sure we get your answers and you'll receive that credit. Lastly, we are on chat and Q&A. So if you do have any questions for our speakers, Sergio and BC today, please feel free to ask as many questions as you'd like. We'd love to answer those throughout the session. And so with that, I'm pleased to introduce you to our speakers. So we have BC Krishna, our CEO and founder of Centime, and Sergio Tsianos, the Centime's Chief Product Officer. BC, do you want to kick us off and share a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. Hello, everybody, and greetings from Hyderabad in India, where I will be for the next week or so. I'm spending time with our team. We have an engineering team here, and I'm spending time with them. It is now 9:30 p.m., and it's nice and warm, and it's also mango season. So, if you ever have an incredible, thirsting for mangoes, then, this is the time of the year to be here. There's no mango like the Indian mango. And I look forward to spending time with you guys.
Thanks, BC. Sergio?
Yeah, hi everybody. My name is Sergio. Greetings from sunny Greece, actually, where I'm originally from. We are a very distributed business. The signs of time. We've been on this for like almost a decade now, and we're very excited to talk to you about AR and how passionate we are about helping businesses optimize collections and show you a bit of what we've done and a bit of what we've learned over the years.
Amazing. Well, BC, I'll let you kind of kick us off and get into the meat of the content today.
Right. And just before we came on, Devin, you and I were having this little side bet on how many people will have trouble with the polls today. So you said 6, and I have 15. So forewarning to everybody, if you have a trouble with the poll, type in the chat box, etc. We'll figure it out. And if you still can't solve it, then, don't panic. After the fact, we will be in touch. Let us know.
On that note, I will launch the first poll right now.
She's launching the first poll.
Many times. I'll give you about 5 minutes to answer this.
All right, so we won't wait for the poll results to come in. Let's just dive right in. I'm going to share my screen, and then, the topic at hand is accounts receivable. And what we're going to do is to approach this from a couple of different perspectives, right? Rather than start from the top and take us through what is accounts receivable, what we're going to do is to touch on a couple of key things in the AR process that we feel are worth diving into. And then we'll do a little show and tell along the way. And then finally, we'll sort of step back and look at the process at large, but not just AR, but broadly, AR is a component of a broader sort of cash management strategy that every business has. So we'll spend time on where AR fits in and how it can impact working capital. So without further ado, here is my screen, and here is what I'd like to kick us off with. So, the bane of AR, of course, is late payments. If everything goes perfectly and you provide the terms that your customers have accepted and they pay you on time, then guess what? There would be no problem. But people pay late. They just do. And there are lots and lots of reasons why they pay late. I'll just highlight a few of them. Certainly, macroeconomic conditions, can impact why people pay late. It could be interest rates, it could be the economy itself, it could be any number of things that relate to things that people have very poor control over. It could be that they don't have very good accounts payable process. So you are in the AR team, you send an invoice out, and your counterparty has to make a payment using a process that they have on the accounts payable side. And those AP processes may or may not be efficient, and that might cause problems. They pay late because they can. Those are the worst kind. I'm just going to use my leverage to pay you late. Or there's seasonality, and that relates to cash issues and working capital issues. And so all of these things can influence payment behavior. But the fact of the matter is that people do pay late. Payment delays are vary quite widely, and they vary a lot by industry. I never get tired of like sharing with you. If you haven't had a chance to look at this report, please do. It's a really wonderful quarterly report that's put out by Dun & Bradstreet and the Credit Research Foundation. It's available online. It's basically as you can see, it's the accounts receivable and DSO report. And I'm just highlighting, for example, what the report says about the construction industry. This is I'll share some other examples here, but this is one of the verticals that is most impacted by late payments. You can see just about 35 or 65% in the general contractor market, 65%, only 65% of customers pay late. And so you can see the distribution, 30 days late, 22%, 6.3% paying 30 to 60 days late, and so forth. Wholesale construction is even worse. But by and large, even in the best industries, nobody is at 100%, right? And when you have strong leverage, strong relationships, you might have business associations you can see paid on time, probably because these dues are collected on an auto paid using a credit card, which will come back to you. This is really how you get to being paid on time, is to do an auto debit. As I said, we'll come back to that. But by and large, you'll see a fairly wide variation. And it's a very interesting report to look at and keep track of and compare to see how your company benchmarks against them. And it's published every quarter, so it's a wonderful report to keep track of over time. So everybody pays late. That's just what happens. Not everybody, a significant portion of people pay late. And so, that doesn't mean that you sit tight, right? You have to ask to be paid, but asking to be paid can be uncomfortable. You provide an invoice. There's an obligation that you're expected to be paid against that invoice. But for the 20-30% of people that don't pay on time, it's uncomfortable. But more to the point, waiting until payments are past due, I would suggest, is unconscionable. You have an expectation to be paid on time, you should be paid on time. You shouldn't wait until the payment is past due. But because of a variety of reasons, mostly process related today, where we find ourselves in a situation where the only device that's available to the AR teams is the so-called dunning letter, which, it's an unpleasant thing to do. It's an unpleasant thing to send, and it's an unpleasant thing to receive. You can see the kind of dynamic of the dunning letter is that, it's an extreme situation. Even the words that are used in the definition of the word done, right? It's repeated and insistent demands for late payments, a demand for payment from a creditor. These are not necessarily the most pleasant circumstances under which, you want to be interacting with a person that is your customer, right? I mean, these customers, being in business for a very long time, I'll tell you that customer relationships are sacred. And, and when you're in the situation where like you're kind of in a position where you're sending dunning letters to customers, as frustrating as it is, it's not a pleasant place to be. So, what I would suggest is that we need to take a different approach. Don't dun, delight instead. What does that mean exactly, right? So, and I'll kind of once again step away from AP and AR processes and really talk a little bit about the psychology of being paid or paying, right? People sometimes have to be reminded to follow through on their intentions. In other words, your customer intends to pay you, right? They may have a process that is not efficient. There may be other reasons why they don't pay you. They have to be reminded to pay you, not reminded that their payment is late, but reminded that they need to follow through on their intentions to pay you. And this is kind of, the point I want to make is that reminders actually have a very firm underpinning in human psychology. It might sound like you're nagging your customer. It might seem like an unfortunately, horrible thing to do, but guess what? There's actually, your customers will be grateful to you if you remind them before the due date rather than send them a dunning letter after the due date. Like I said, reminders have a firm underpinning in human psychology, and the concept here is what's called cognitive offloading. We can't remember everything, and sometimes what we do is that we offload, we rely on our external environment in order to reduce our cognitive demand. I have so many things that I'm thinking about. I need to be able to write down my things to do on a piece of paper or on a smartphone in order to not forget the thing that I'm supposed to do. My intentions, in other words, are offloaded. Cognitive offloading is the term that psychologists refer to. That's what reminders really are. But here's the other thing, particularly when it comes to payments, right? Payment reminder systems assist in cognitive offloading. Very specifically, think about even the best intended people with the best intentions, right? Reminders are undoubtedly helpful, but they're more likely to be used for intentions when they're associated with a higher financial reward. And this is where we come back to, being paid against invoices, right? Weirdly, it actually has a negative, right? I mean, it's not a higher financial reward. It's actually the person, their customer, when paying you, is actually depleting their working capital. It's the opposite of a higher financial reward. As much as you are entitled to it, the psychology of setting a reminder to pay for something that is unpleasant to begin with in order to reduce the working capital can be, something that causes people to not do what you want them to do. So I think what we really need to recognize, therefore, is that in the context of AR, your customers will delight from and will appreciate the fact that you're setting up a reminder system to ensure that it's essentially, think of what you do through a reminder system is assisting in that cognitive offload. So that's my point, is that, one of the most critical things that accounts receivable professionals can do is to set up payment reminder systems and do this in a way that it's proactive, not dunning letters, not sending it after the fact, but do it before the due date. That it's proactive, that it's timely, that it's personalized, right? Every relationship is different. If you have a very, very important customer, the way in which you interact with them and send a reminder to them, might be different than a customer that's perhaps not as valuable to you. It's not to say that, as I said, every relationship is sacred, but personalizing those interactions is super important. It is reflective of your brand. Sometimes like the way you communicate with customers might be intentionally cheeky, or it might be very conservative, or it might be very friendly. These reminders are reflections of the fact that your business has a personality that does need to be conveyed through these reminders. Multimodal. We knee-jerk response that we might always have is, oh, I need to send a reminder equals an email reminder. Not necessary. It could be that you designate somebody within your organization, like an account manager, to be able to pick up the phone, 4, 5, 6, 8, 10 days before the due date and say like, hey, listen, you just want to remind you that your payment is due. How's it going? Let's go out to that game of golf when you have a moment. That is information rich, that you have the ability to tell the customer what they need to pay. Was there an early payment discount that you offered? Let's remind them of that. Are there more than one invoice that is unpaid? That it's actionable. You give them an easy way for them to go in and make that payment. That they have the options to pay by credit card, by check, by ACH, different ways in which they make those payments. So the payment reminder is not just a nagging reminder of the fact that a payment is due. It's actually an extension of your relationship with the customer that is critical and an opportunity to get reinforced. So that's really what I wanted to say is that, yeah, AR is about sending invoices and being paid, but the opportunity to interact with your customers and delight in that relationship is really what I think a payment reminder represents. So with that as a backdrop, what I thought I would do now is to turn it over to Sergio, who can walk us through how payment reminders work. In general, you can implement this in a number of ways. And what we're going to do is to show you how it works in our product in Centime's accounts receivable module. Take it away, Sergio.
And Sergio, just before you dive in, I'm going to launch poll number 2. So we'll keep that up for 5 or so minutes.
Perfect. Thanks, thanks, guys. So what I would like to take you through is how we envision a systematic process around achieving the goals that BC laid out, and around creating, let's say, a communications strategy with customers from an AR point of view, which is systematic, scalable, personalized, multiple different ways of communicating, all assisting with the goal of basically collecting payments on time, reducing late payments, and generally scaling the process, because obviously many businesses are growing, and therefore they need to make sure that they grow without necessarily continuously adding more and more people to be performing manual tasks. Centime is a cash management platform, so that's why you see many things here. Our focus in the beginning of the call obviously will be AR of the discussion. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go straight into our receivables setup panel, where we can set up what we call workflows. Part of workflows, of course, is payment reminders. There's other communications that take place with customers. There is presenting invoices to them. There is sending them statements. All of these things are basically being automated from a communications point of view. But what I wanted to highlight is more the customer segment workflows that we have in our product, which basically is the starting point. The starting point is understanding every business thinks about customers in a different way. Every business segments their customers in a different way. We have come across business clients of ours who segment their customers based on how, like, what is their payment behavior. So in this example, we have prompt payers, slow payers, very slow payers. We have come across other business clients that segment based on the product lines that their customers are buying, that the products and services that their customers are buying from them. So there's many different ways to segment customers, and segmentation of the customer base is the starting point when it comes to like personalizing the communications with customers. Now, in this example, what I've created is 3 different workflows where it's based on the payment behavior of the customer. If I take an example of the prompt payers now and I click on this, what we can basically do is really come up with a series of steps that revolve around the due date of an invoice. And as you can see, this is basically proactive before the due date. All of these actions take place basically in a proactive fashion. And then there is after the due date, things that might happen if an invoice is delayed. So the goal when thinking about reminders and generally the way to communicate with customers regarding an open invoice is to make sure that things, first of all, are personalized. So we talked about personalizing based on the payment behavior of the customer, the sequence of the actions that you take with the customer, how dense, for example, it might be, how many reminders you might want to send before the due date. But the second part, of course, is how do we talk to customers? So if you have, let's say, people who have a very good payment behavior, they're in that 66% of the construction industry services where people, contractor service who pay current, then you might want to talk to them in a very gentle way. You know, this is a gentle note. It's just a reminder, you know, that you have an invoice which is coming due. And by the way, you have a way to actually see and always be up to speed with your open invoices, which is a customer portal. And this customer portal will give you information about all the invoices that you have, et cetera, so that they can always be kept up to date about what is happening with their open invoices and never be caught by surprise. So personalizing how you contact a specific segment, and personalizing the exact words that we use to reflect our brand, our tone of voice, and how we want to communicate with this segment of customers. And of course, including all the information in the communications that will be useful for the recipient of the communication to know exactly why we're getting in touch with them. So if I show you an example now, this was a workflow that we set up. Of course, before I go into the example, I want to touch on one more thing. As BC said, multimodal. Multimodal means that sending an email might not be the only action. Sending an automated email might not be the only action. I might want to contact an account manager internally and say, you know what, this invoice is late, or this one invoice is due in a few days. Why don't you contact the customer to basically figure out what's happening? I might create a task, which is to make a phone call. I might create a task, which is some internal process. So all of these types of basically communications, both with the customer and internally, are things that you can create. And then that creates a holistic communication strategy, both externally with customers and internally, and a process that allows basically better, more efficient collections and a better result when it comes to reducing DSOs. So if we focus specifically on reminders now, an example of what we just looked at is an email that looks like this. It's an email that basically says, this is a quick reminder. You have a customer portal which you can access to basically review your open invoices and information regarding the invoice. So customers always have access to a portal that gives them full visibility into their open invoices. So if I go back and I go now into my my AR module in Centime, I can see that number one, all my customers are on some workflow. This is a list of customers, and these are all the workflows that we have set, and we have put them onto workflows. And if as a customer, I receive a reminder email about an open invoice, by clicking on either here or the pay button, I am taken to a portal, which of course is personalized for our business, because this is our logo and so on and so forth. And if I log in now as the contact of the customer, I'm now wearing my customer hat, I will be able to basically review my open invoices and see all the information that I need to be able to make a payment. And the existence of a portal is there to mitigate, things like having a poor AP process, losing invoices, not remembering this cognitive load that BC talked about, not remembering that there is an open invoice. Let me just pick up my security code for 1 second. So I'm picking up my security code, coming back. So now it's here now. When I log into the portal as a customer who received the communication, a reminder, I can basically see all the information I need in order to be able to understand that I have open invoice. I can see that this is the portal of Angel Consulting, who are the contacts, how many open invoices I have, and these are the open invoices along with credits which might be available, discounts that might be available, the date, see which invoices are late. And of course, I can save my payment details, I can save my payment method, I can pay by ACH, I can pay by credit card, and so on and so forth. So if we now take a step back and combine what we just talked about in this section, we said we will basically make sure that we establish an automated process, systematic automated process to communicate with customers about open invoice on a proactive basis. We will segment our customer base so that we have appropriate sequences of communication and density of communications based on how we want to communicate with the segment, based on how good they are in paying in this scenario. We will personalize the communications themselves with customers so that we can talk based on our brand, tone of voice, and so on and so forth. And then our customers receiving those reminders will basically have access to a portal where they can see everything that's happening, and they can simply, make payments and get this done. So that is the first part of basically how to make sure that we delight customers, because you can see that with this experience, you're not just picking up the phone and saying you are late, but you are basically keeping them in the loop about everything, giving them an interface which is delightful in order for them to understand what is going on with their open invoices, and effectively trying everything we can to give the customers a positive experience when it comes to making payments.
Thank you, Sergio. Yep, thank you. I'm going to take the screen back again. And again, like as Sergio said, the two concepts that I think we tried to highlight. One is the the idea of a payment reminder system, which is probably the thing that I want to, really kind of, leave you with. The second is the existence of a payment portal that contains the information that, the customer is typically looking for when they receive the reminder. So don't fixate too much. The portal is important, but the primary objective here is to ensure that you support and extend the customer's, essentially sort of use the payment reminder as an extension of the customer sort of consciousness, for lack of a better term. So that's kind of one concept that we wanted to just really highlight. The second concept is just really a very basic, what we take for granted today, that most companies, not most companies, many companies offer payment terms. When you offer payment terms, let's not forget that you are offering credit. You are a creditor, right? You're offering 30, 45 payment days of payments. And in this kind of environment that we live in, high interest rate environment, you can do the math to see how much opportunity cost you have when you do that. So the question, of course, is, can you really afford to do that? In other words, can you afford to provide the kinds of payment terms that you do offer, given that many businesses want to be able to keep very tight control over cash and working capital? So I showed you in the DNB report that the associations have a 99.5% on-time payment rate. How does that happen, right? It's because they probably put all of their customers on auto pay. So it's a term that might not, some of you are intuitively familiar with auto pay, but let me be more specific and say that auto pay, the idea of auto pay is that on the payment due date, that you would automatically debit the customer's bank account or charge their credit card on file. To be clear, when you combine auto pay with maybe payment terms that are 30 days, you don't have to sacrifice your 30-day payment terms. In other words, the customer might say to you, you know what, I need you to give me 30-day payment terms because I have a process, I have this, I have that. The practicality of me paying you exactly on the day that you invoice me is not, meaningful. But the flip side of it is that I, as the creditor, have an expectation and an obligation, that you will pay me on that date. So, it's a conversation that you need to have, and it's not an uncomfortable conversation. Because when you see how to run the process, you will find that this doesn't have to be a unilateral process. It doesn't have to be one where it says, you know what, Mr. Customer, I am going to debit your account on the 30th day. But there are options that you can provide as to when, as to whether the customer opts in or not. Ideally, also how much, of the invoice, how large the invoice needs to be. I think that sort of conversation around like what can be a candidate for auto pay is a conversation with the customer. And it's a conversation that where the customer recognizes that, you know what, cash is important to me too, right? In as much as cash is important to you, it's important to me. And you don't have to simply say, these are the payment terms, forget about it. Because the reality is that if you don't also follow through with auto pay, then you're tempting fate that the customer is late on their payments. So I think that, it's auto pay. I don't think people have paid as much attention to and pay as much credit to auto pay as it's due. And the question, of course, is you're probably thinking, will it work for my business? Our simple premise is that you won't know if you don't try. Small wins, it doesn't mean that 100% of your invoices are going to be auto-paid, but even small wins can yield big benefits. In essence, what you're trying to do is to change your customer behavior. It can be done incrementally. It doesn't have to be done right off the bat. And our experience working with our own customers and our clients' customers is that customers are surprisingly accepting of auto pay. You probably have more leverage than you think. And then it's always a good idea to start with AR invoices that perhaps smaller, so that you're not sort of threatening to debit the customer against that $1 million invoice that you sent them. So, the actual implementation of autopay can be very collaborative and very incremental, but the benefits are incredible. Imagine being in a situation where you're able to go to your management team, to your CFO, to your board and say, you know what, I am like the best performing company in my peer group, and my, days past due are minuscule. And so what I'd like to then do is to show you again through Sergio's words and through the product, how autopay can be set up and how customers can have control over the autopay process.
And Sergio, while you set that up, I'm going to launch poll number 3 for everyone.
Great, thanks, BC. So as BC mentioned, we have integrated into our product a very collaborative approach for proposing autopay as a means of payment, essentially to customers. In this example here, you can see that I have a view which is specifically tailored to understanding which of my customers have actually opted in and enrolled for autopay and which of them have not. We treat autopay as a process where as a customer, I can look at my, as a business, I can look at my customers and I can decide which of them I want to gradually start inviting to basically participate in an autopay process. And of course, through that, communicate what would be the benefits, because there are mutual benefits to an auto debit, autopay process. So what I can do is strategize basically on my accounts as an AR team, and I can say, I want to enroll, for example, Blue Software, because Blue Software is a key client. Their average invoice value is a couple of $1,000. Therefore, these are small invoices. And as I'm doing that, what I'm doing is I'm proposing, I'm suggesting, I'm educating. Again, it's all about personalization. It's all about, talking to them and saying, you will be able to simplify your payments with autopay. What are the benefits? Peace of mind. You never miss a payment deadline. Convenience. You can select your preferred payment schedule. You're going to save time because you don't have to go through a payables process for these smaller invoices. So what we are trying to do, therefore, is enable our clients to strategize around their accounts, identify the ones that they would like to propose autopay. In our experience, autopay doesn't work if you force it on someone's throat. It works if you approach it in a collaborative and educational way. So once I basically enroll Blue Software into autopay, it's a very similar process to the payment reminder, where Blue Software will receive a communication from us, from the business, from the client. They will receive a communication saying that, all the things that we saw in this email. And then once they receive that communication, they will be prompted to access an authorization panel for autopay. So if I open this email that I just received, let me just open it in a larger window.
And while you do that, I think that, I just wanted to say that, one other thing is that I think in general, I think we live in a society where we have a lot of faith and trust in each other. And I think that, people tend to have reasonable behavior and are very understanding, right? There's no harm, I don't think, in saying to your customer, hey, listen, it's just important for me to be paid on time. If you want me to serve you better, then, guess what? I expect to be paid on time. So you do me a favor and help me serve you better by paying me on time. And certainly it can be a message that can be part of like the autopay setup.
Certainly. Yes, thanks, BC. So continuing on the process, therefore, we are now proposing to the client, and I think we're going to be changing this messaging to add what BC proposed. The moment that the customer now clicks on set up autopay, what happens is that they're taken through a very, very simple form that basically asks them to confirm that they're enrolling for autopay. Again, it's something that needs to be very transparent. It's something that needs to be very clear that somebody has opted in. So if I enter my address as microservices.com as an example, then simply what I'm prompted to do is enter my preferred payment method. That can be ACH, can be credit card. And ultimately, when I enter my preferred payment method, what will happen is that the business will be enrolled on autopay. And then subsequently, all this information will be clearly laid out within the customer portal. So in this case, this customer has opted in for autopay. They have 2 open invoices. And these invoices are scheduled for payment. They're scheduled for payment on the due date because that's what the customer opted in to basically pay on the due date. But there is optionality. There is when would the business prefer to basically be debited? For example, they might decide that they want to be debited on the last day of the discount window. Early payment discounts is a way to balance the fact that you are asking to auto debit the customer, but at the same time you're giving them a discount, an early payment discount in exchange for that for this convenience that the customer
Exactly. And that's, sorry, Sergio, I think I just wanted to reinforce that. I think there's some conversation in the chat as well. And Joseph asks the same question. What's the benefit? I mean, the benefit is if I, as the, biller, am doing an auto pay, I might be comfortable giving you a small discount, right, against the payment so that I can be paid using auto pay. So the benefit to the customer can be a small discount against the face value of the invoice.
Exactly. So, and that fundamentally concludes this collaborative process where it starts by strategizing which accounts we want to propose autopay. What we tell our clients is that, you don't lose anything by proposing to your customers to kind of do autopay. It's an option that they can consider. You're not forcing it on them. You're basically asking them to consider it and also placing the benefits. You might offer them early payment discounts and so on and so forth. And then it's the communication, the education about what autopay is, how it works, and like what are the benefits. And then it's about setting it up. And then it's set and forget. How a quote that we get very often from our clients when we explain autopay too is that, oh my God, so this means no more collections. That's what it is. Whoever is set up on autopay, it means no more collections efforts for your team anymore.
No more collections and getting paid on time, providing customers with an incentive to, to be able to debit their account or charge their card, and in general, so to be able to reduce your DSOs. So that kind of is the. My point is this, right? I mean, for many people, auto pay might seem like an anathema, both on the payer side as well as on the AR and the AP side. But if you try it and it works, it's just really a wonderful thing. It saves everybody, lots and lots of headaches. So I'll go back to my presentation because I wanted to sort of step back, like I said, and then talk some about what is the role, after all, of accounts receivable, right? At some level, you can think of accounts receivable as a basic essential process where you send an invoice out, you manage collections, you manage disputes, you receive payments, you post cash against the open invoice, and so forth. That's all good. But the reality is that there's more to AR than managing collections and payments. And we don't necessarily think about this, but I think I'd like to just really highlight and reinforce this in the 15, 20 minutes or so that we have left. AR is really a critical component of an overall business's cash management discipline, right? Cash, as they say, is the lifeblood of every enterprise. And you all know that effective cash management is the key to business success. Or to say it another way, if you don't manage your cash well, you're really playing with fire. There are many, many businesses that have simply gone under because they have, they're not paying attention to the gas gauge. They're paying attention to how far they've traveled, but not necessarily how much is left for them to travel to the next destination. So, the way we like to think about this, and hopefully you as well would agree with what I'm about to say, is that cash management is really a set of interrelated processes. In other words, cash management can be thought of as very abstract, but it's not. It consists of a very concrete set of interrelated processes that at the end of the day impact your cash and working capital. Take AR, for example, right? What is AR? AR at the end of the day is about shoring up your working capital, building up your working capital. The shorter your DSO, the quicker your working capital builds up. We can get caught up in the nuance of the process, but at the end of the day, the strategic imperative that every AR team has is about managing working capital. Similarly, the strategic imperative that every AP team has is about managing working capital. In as much as AR is about shortening days sales outstanding, AP is about lengthening days payables outstanding. We don't necessarily always think about AP in terms of hey, who should I pay? When should I pay that person? How much of the bill should I pay, and what pool of liquidity should I pay from? In other words, I'm always strongly incented, especially if I've been given reminders to pay on time. But I also have some cash challenges, right? If it turns out that like, I have a choice between making payroll and making a supplier payment, and making the supplier payment causes me to like be in an uncomfortable situation as far as working capital is concerned, guess what choice I'm going to make? I'm going to make payroll, not my supplier payment. And both of these operations, both of these processes are really kind of heavily influenced and can be impacted by your cash forecast. Many businesses don't necessarily build 13-week cash forecasts consistently. When they do, it can be based on some tribal knowledge and a long ago, built spreadsheet. But it can be done more systematically. But I like to say that the cash forecast itself can be extremely helpful, but it can be more beneficial when you think about the cash forecast as a map to help, for example, which collections to focus on or which payables to, really kind of, think about making more strategically. Working capital also, you're always like thinking about how do I maximize my yield? Where do I place it? Which money market account do I put it into so that, the liquidity that I don't need for the next 3 to 6 months can be placed in a high yield account. It's also about ensuring that, you're not suddenly victimized by fraudsters who are constantly working to relieve you of your cash. So cash management is not just about AP and AR and forecasting, but also about managing risk. It's about like monitoring your performance. What is my DSO? How is it changing over time? Is it trending in the right direction? Now that you have a chance to look at that, uh, DNB report, you can benchmark yourself. What is my SIC code? What is the DNB saying about like the performance of businesses in my SIC code? How should I be doing? And how does it compare to my actual performance? And then finally, it's always helpful to have a little bit of credit. I don't mean a long-term, I mean a short-term credit facility. Think of it as like, hey, I've got a timing issue with my payables and my receivables, and how do I kind of put a few $100,000 in my balance sheet so that I can end the quarter where I said I would end? That's important. Or that I put enough cash on my balance sheet to sort of stave off any risk that I might have that receivable that is I'm expecting to come due doesn't actually come due. So all stuff that you probably all know already, but we tend to think of all of these individual components serving a broader goal, which is to help manage your cash. So I know we're going to be running short of time here. So again, Sergio will run through this really quickly if you wouldn't mind taking over and walking through in 2 or 3 minutes the rest of the accounts receivable capability beyond what we showed, and then kind of just really flashing up forecasting KPIs and the AP module as well. And then please give me about 5 minutes at the end so we can wrap up.
Just alert me, please.
Yeah, I will. Yeah.
All right.
Now, for poll number 4 just launched as well. So
How are we doing on the over under, Devin?
I don't know, BC. I think you may be winning this bet. I think we've
I'm
had
winning.
a few more questions in terms of polls than I anticipated.
I think more than solving the AR problem, I think we need to figure out how to consistently get people to see the poll and answer it. I think it may be more important than world peace at this point.
All right. So very quickly, we talked about communicating with customers, but AR is also about having a good internal process around being able to understand what is happening when you have like 5 invoices open. It's easy. If you have 100, 1,000, 10,000 invoices, it becomes a lot more complicated. Many people getting involved. So one aspect of the AR process is the ability to make sure that there is visibility into everything that might be relating to an invoice or a customer, being able to take notes and keep like all the current information about what is happening with the progress of collecting against an invoice, being able to create tasks for other team members, be it in the AR team or be it outside of the AR team, salespeople, account managers, customer success people might get involved in the collection process. So creating tasks for people and basically enabling them to participate in the collections process is critical, and keeping them in the loop. Understanding what is the status of an invoice. For example, you might somebody might call a customer and the customer might say, you know what, I promised to pay on a certain date, and keeping track of the promise to pay date is very, very important, or keeping track of something that might be on hold. So having tools in a product like this to make sure that the AR is managed properly internally is critical for the success and the scaling of the operation. Similarly, another part which I want to show is basically the ability to understand what is not going well. For example, here I have a view of 2 invoices which are on hold. They're on hold because of either a billing error or a quality dispute that came from the client. It's important, therefore, that not only the ones which are open, but the ones which are stuck somehow are basically monitored and can basically be acted upon by the appropriate team members. The last part I want to mention AR, because I have only a couple of minutes, is the fact that it's important to connect the dots between AR and the cash flow of the business. So anything that happens from a collections point of view is basically that automatically reflected back to the short term, the 13-week cash flow forecast of the business. So for example, if an invoice is late, let's say this one was due, take this example, this one was due on May 4th. Today, obviously, we have May 24th, so it's 20 days late. If I call the customer says, you know what, I promised to pay you by Friday, by today, and I set the date to be today, you will automatically see that this is reflected in the cash flow forecast of the business. So I'm going to go here on this week, and you see that we have basically, it's very small to see at this point, but you'll see that it's reflected here. So I see that there is a positive cash impact of the amount of the invoice, $3,500 on the 24th of May, because I've managed to basically get a promise to pay from the customer that they're going to pay me. So connecting the dots between AR, collections, the knowledge of an invoice getting paid or being delayed, and the cash flow forecast of the business is critical in order to make sure that the business actually does have a accurate 13-week cash flow forecast. Because the worst thing that can happen is basically a big surprise, an invoice being very late that has a big cash impact, and then having payroll to run on a Friday and not being able to basically satisfy your payroll needs. So this is our forecasting module. Basically, our forecasting module is gives the ability for a business to very easily build an up to 6-month cash flow forecast. The golden standard is a 13-week cash flow forecast. This cash flow forecast is direct in nature, so it's built bottom up based on actual AP, actual AR, and other transactions like payroll or rent or other transactions might happen, which get extrapolated with the use of machine learning in the future, in the next 6 months. It is used, and its intention is to basically be used for planning purposes. So the functionality we offer is forecasting and planning. So when we think about planning, we think about, you know what, I have an AP run I need to make on a weekly basis, on a bi-weekly basis. So I know how much my cash will be. I know how much I have to pay on other things outside of AP, like payroll. So I can then start planning my payables, or even planning my receivables, and prioritizing the outreach that I want to make to customers, basically in order to draw cash in faster by accelerating collections. So forecasting and planning, we think of these two processes as very, very much interconnected with AP and AR and the AP and AR processes. So we talked about AR, we talked about connecting the dots between AR, forecasting and planning, but a very, very key component, of course, of the process is also AP, because for many businesses, particularly the industries, the physical industries, there's a lot of AP that will basically significantly impact the cash of the business on a weekly basis when people run their payment runs. So from an AP standpoint, there are two components that we basically help businesses with. Number one is efficiency. It's like when we started doing this, BC started this 15 years ago almost. People were looking at him and saying, AP automation, you're crazy. Why would anybody automate AP? But now AP automation is a given. People should automate AP, should remove the manual tasks, should not be keying invoices into their general ledger, should not be manually taking paper and pushing it around offices, should have a product that basically allows them to automate the accounts payable process. And more importantly, both for normal invoices, but also for PO-based invoices. We know how much of a pain, if for anybody of you that uses POs in the business, we know how much of a pain point it is to match two-way or three-way match POs to invoices, and good receipts notes. So what we have is a fully automated process where the AP team can basically automate all the things that can be automated, and then fundamentally focus themselves on solving exceptions. So from a pure matching point of view, you don't care when everything is matching perfectly within a three-way matching scenario, but you do want to know when there is a rate mismatch. You do want to know when there's a quantity mismatch, so that these exceptions are then managed internally by the appropriate stakeholders, by the warehouse, by the inventory team, by whoever it is responsible for managing those mismatches. And of course, automating coding is another important aspect. Automating the approval processes, another important aspect. So invoice automation and automating all the manual tasks regarding invoice processing and focusing the AP team on managing and resolving exceptions is one key part which drives a lot of efficiency. And of course, the second part, which is quite critical from a cash management point of view, is the ability to then plan payment runs in the context of cash. So I can basically, similarly to AR, I can plan my weekly my weekly payment run. Let's take the next 2 weeks, for example, and let's look at the daily cash outflows of the business. I can see basically what are my daily cash outflows, what are my daily cash inflows over the next 2 weeks. And as I'm now creating a payment run, I will be able to always see what is the impact on my cash if I were to basically say, you know what, this payment, let's take this $4,500 payment, I need to pay it today. I need to pay today. The moment I say I need to pay today, you will see that there is automatically the cash impact of negative $4,500 appears within my on my cash flow forecast. So I know how much my closing balance will be the moment I schedule a payment run. And many businesses do this in a very manual way. They will download their AP aging. They will sit down with the CFO and say, should we pay this? Should we not pay this? Should we pay this? Oh, this supplier is basically shouting. And then at the end of this process, they will say, do we have enough money to basically make this payment run? So connecting the dots between accounts payable, payments, and the payment runs and the cash flow forecast of the business and the closing balance of the business is another very important aspect in order to completely now connect the dots between the AP and AR processes and the cash management side of the business. And finally, before I hand over to BC, we have we have a KPI module, key performance indicators. Many businesses don't even know what their cash runway is because people simply don't calculate those things. So we have packaged some key performance indicators for a business when it comes to cash flow, receivables, and payables, and we display that information based on different periods, so that the business can understand what their performance is over time, and can see actually see some things that can really inform their strategy when it comes to investments or growing the business, or even thinking about things like short-term working capital, because if they have a very short cash runway, they need to always be prepared with having a plan B if things go south for any reason. So to connect the dots back to that, of course, we do offer banking services. We do offer a high yield checking account, which allows the business to basically stash their extra cash that they can unlock by optimizing the AP and AR processes into generating yield, particularly in this high interest environment. And also, of course, we do offer a short-term working capital line of credit, which can be accessed through a credit card and through basically simply drawing cash into our bank account and using that cash as a short-term to plug short-term cash flow gaps.
Good job, Sergio. Thank you. You're right on time. So a couple of quick things I just wanted to say is that we have a Rohel Ali, I think we have a question from you, lots of questions actually from you. So I don't think we'll have the time to cover it, but we do want to. So if you don't mind just dropping Devin a note with your questions, we'll get back to you. I would appreciate that very much. So let me take control back again. But I also wanted to say, it's probably if you don't mind, I'd like to make a plug. This is, of course, what we do. We are passionate about this. There are solutions in the marketplace today that are focused on just AP or just AR or just forecasting. But to the best of our knowledge, there is not a product in the marketplace today that really takes a cash management centric approach to all of these different necessary components and offers it in one comprehensive platform today. So if that is interesting to you, plus the fact that, even if I'm saying it myself, we're decent blokes and, we're easy to do business with. and we tend to be somewhat thoughtful and almost even fun to work with. So, I hope that this session conveys all of those things, and you find it meaningful to reach out to us so that we can begin the conversation. So just to wrap up, though, a lot of people might have thought of accounts receivable as this boring, humdrum, process, but it really is quite exciting and quite strategic, right? Think of your AR team as a critical component of cementing and extending relationships with your customer. Your AR team is a delighter. It functions as an extension of your client's cognitive systems. It helps them do their job better because at the end of the day, it is their intention to pay you, but you help them with those intentions. The second is that by personalizing communication, by giving your customers options to decide, how to pay, providing them with things like auto pay, collections performance is actually enhanced through empathetic, personalized communication. And then finally, for yourself, that improved performance directly contributes to the most strategic imperative that you have within your business, which is to manage cash. So I hope all of that makes sense. And, we've just had a blast doing this. I think if when done right, you will see this picture tries to convey that there's really should be no, how shall I put it, sort of white space between you and your customer. You are connected at the hip. You are an extension of their team. They are an extension of your team. And accounts receivable, the exchange of capital, as emotional as that is, it can be a really empowering process.
Thank you, BC, and thank you, Sergio. BC, I'm gonna even share my screen also, and let me close out the chat and Q&A so that doesn't pop up. But I'm gonna even one up your offer. I have the demo link in our chat right now. So if you are somebody that is interested in chatting more about your AP or your AR process, and you are a US-based company with 20 plus employees and are a user of Sage Intacct, NetSuite, or QuickBooks online or desktop, we'd love to send you a pair of AirPods if you sit through and hang out with us and chat about your company for a quick meeting, and then following that, a longer personalized demo with some of our sales team. If you do this before June 7th, we will send you AirPods or a gift of your choice from a little virtual shop of ours. So please check out centime.com/demo and meet some more of our amazing team members. And we'd love to hear more about what you're doing for AR or AP, whichever is maybe one of your problem areas right now. So thank you again for joining us for this session. Sergio, BC, I can't thank you enough. I think the chat said it all. People really enjoyed today's webinar. So I appreciate all the time and work you guys put into this.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you as well, Devin. Thanks for taking care of us. And I think that next time we'll have to continue to work on how to make sure that we get those pesky questions answered better.
I know, we're getting there. Thank you so much, everyone, and have a wonderful weekend.
Bye-bye. See you.
Bye-bye.